April 27th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that today marks the 1 year point since we began to meet in a virtual environment. I want to thank commissioners, the public, and staff for adapting to the environment and transitioning to this style of engagement. I'm hopeful that our meetings will shift to in-person soon and that we can implement some of the best practices we have used this past year. As always, if any participants have issues with technology, please send a message to the moderator, Ray. We have a lengthy agenda today with 8 discussion items plus a committee report. I would ask everyone to focus on outstanding issues and be efficient with our time. 3 items are listed under old business and have received staff and applicant presentations and have received public comment. 5 items are listed under new business, and we will hear a full staff and applicant presentation. I would ask the commissioners to hold all questions until the conclusion of all presentations and any public comments. Finally, please be recognized by the chairperson before speaking. One item on our agenda under new business, item F.1, case Z6920 on Oberlin Road, has requested a deferral to allow the applicant time to add conditions to address identified concerns. Without objection, that case is deferred to our next agenda. Okay, seeing none, we start every meeting with an opportunity for the public to comment on an item not contained on the agenda. No one has signed up for public comment today. Moving on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is a list of requests that can be acted upon in one motion. Today we have 3 items on the consent agenda. Generally, we vote once by a show of hands to move all items to a recommended future agenda. I would like to propose something a little different today as a mechanism to allow difficult or atypical cases adequate discussion time. Please note that any vote on the consent agenda does not reflect the ultimate disposition of a case, and all items will return to a future Planning Commission meeting where the final vote for a recommendation to council will be made. The first item on consent is Z6720 on Blue Ridge Road. This appears on the consent agenda and was slated for discussion today, but a publication error caused a 2-week deferral. Additionally, the applicant has indicated they are working on conditions to address neighborhood traffic concerns. For that reason, I'd like to make a motion that Z6720 appear on a future Transportation Committee meeting agenda. Do I have a second? Commissioner Bennett?
Second.
Thank you. I've made a motion as chair and Commissioner Bennett has seconded. Because this is not a final vote, I will ask for a show of hands from all those who support the motion. The motion passes unanimously. The second item on consent, I'd like to make a motion that this next item, Z221 on White Oak Road, appear on an upcoming full Planning Commission meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Winters. I've made a motion and Commissioner Winters has seconded the motion. By show of hands, how many support this motion? Any opposed? No. The motion passes unanimously. The third item on consent is Z321 on Preston Place. This is a unique case involving a rezoning from conservation management. I'd like to make a motion that this case appear on a future committee of the whole meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Winters. We have a motion and a second on the table. I'd like to ask for a show of hands to vote on where this goes to the agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. Moving on to the committee report. There are 3 items listed under the committee report today. 2 of these items were discussed at the April 22nd Committee of the Whole meeting. Because of the timing of publication of this agenda, the committee recommendation is not listed on the agenda today. 1 item was discussed at the Strategic Planning Committee and is an informational item with no action needed. Starting with the Committee of the Whole report. This first item discussed at the April 22nd Committee of the Whole meeting was TC 1920. This is a staff-initiated text change that would alter and amend the rezoning process. The committee recommended approval of the ordinance with two changes. One, the removal of language on page 5 in subsection D2C that currently allows a zoning condition to alter block perimeter standards. And number two, a clarification on page 14 in subsection G.1a that any zoning case on a property that has been previously decided in the last 2 years must obtain approval from City Council before a new request can be filed. I understand that staff has amended the ordinance to reflect these changes, and this will be included in the recommendation to City Council. We should have received that by email and reviewed it prior to this meeting. Are there any further questions regarding TC 1920? Okay. Seeing none, I would like to ask for a motion for TC 1920.
Oh,
You're fine.
Commissioner Mann?
okay, I move to adopt a proposed consistency statement dated April 27th, 2021, containing the agenda materials, and to recommend approval for the zoning text amendment TC 1920. The action taken is reasonable in the public interest because the proposed text change will align the UDO with state law, also resulting in a more efficient review of the rezoning applications and encourage a more thorough and productive discourse between applicants and the surrounding community.
Thank you, Commissioner Mann. Do we have a second? Commissioner McIntosh?
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a motion and the second on the table. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, I will ask for a roll call of the votes.
Good morning. Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Good morning. Aye.
Chair Fox,
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman,
Aye.
Commissioner Mann,
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver,
Aye.
Commissioner Rains,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Winters.
Nay. And I'd like to add my reason for nay is that this change, that there is not a system in place that equitably supports the voices of the community. Therefore, I vote no.
Thank you for your vote, Vice Chair Winters, and for the rationale behind it. The motion passes 7-2. Do I have that correctly? Please correct me, Chinitha, if I got the count incorrect.
7-1.
7-1. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. The second item discussed at the April 22nd Committee of the Whole meeting was Z721. This request was reviewed by the Committee of the Whole as it was deemed inconsistent with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map prior to our review. The committee recommends unanimous approval of this request. Are there any additional questions about Z721? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. Commissioner McIntosh?
I move to approve Z721 3095 Gresham Lake Road. The rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest because it increases the housing supply in the area and it increases subsidized housing, which we are very happy to see. A well-designed project. We hope to see many more like this across Raleigh.
Thank you for your motion. Is there a second? Commissioner Bennett?
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the table. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, I would like to ask Shanitha for a roll call of the vote.
Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair Fox,
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman,
Aye.
Commissioner Mann,
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver,
Aye.
Commissioner Rains,
Aye.
Vice Chair Winters,
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. The third committee report is from the April 20th Strategic Planning Committee meeting. The committee heard information regarding housing affordability from Erica Brown with the Triangle J Council of Governments and Larry Jarvis with the city's Housing and Neighborhoods Department. This is an informational discussion and no action is needed. Vice Chair Winters, Chair of the Strategic Planning Committee, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I would encourage everyone, if you have not, if you were unable to be there, but to go and watch the video. It was a great conversation. And we will be circling back because there were questions that we had and we're going to follow up and get more information. So please go back and watch it if you haven't had the opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am. We have 3 items listed under old business today. These items have been previously discussed and we have received presentations and heard from the public. Each request was deferred to allow the applicant to consider revised zoning conditions or changes to the application that might mitigate areas of inconsistency. For each item, I would ask for a short update from staff, focusing on the revisions to the request. The first item, E.1, case number Z2220. Without objection, the recusal of Commissioner O'Haver stands for this case. Seeing none, the East End Market PD is a request to rezone approximately 11 acres of land at the intersection of Whitaker Mill and Wake Forest Road from multiple different zoning districts to a planned development. This request was discussed twice at the Committee of the Whole, where the committee recommended denial of the request on a split vote. The item was deferred at our last meeting to allow the applicant to consider alterations to the master plan. The applicant has offered amendments to the master plan since the last Committee of the Whole discussion. I would ask Ira Mabel for a brief update on the request, focusing on the master plan changes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Ira Mabel. Thank you, Chair Fox, for the recap. The only other note that I'll make is that your deadline for this case is tomorrow, so you do either need to make a recommendation today or request a time extension from City Council. Next slide, please. So just a refresher of the site and the couple of other landmarks that we had talked about pretty regularly. Go to the next slide, JP. This is a recap of all of the different various maximum heights. I do want to pause here. There are 2 with asterisks. So the first is the 5 stories, center left there. Previously, I had said that the language describing that height maximum had been vague, and so that language has been improved a lot. And so I am much more confident now that this area in the green labeled 5 stories is enforceable that way. So just that point of clarification. And then the other asterisk is at the 15 stories, which is where the changes to the master plan have all occurred since the last discussion. So go to the next slide, JP. This is what was in the discussion during Committee of the Whole, where the committee took a vote. There are 2 development scenarios described in the master plan. The first is if the building on this tract is developed at 9 stories or less. And when the committee saw this, there was the 10-foot step back that's shown in green, setback, excuse me, and then another step back on Whitaker Mill Road in red there. So if you go to the next slide. The case today, after the changes that the applicant has submitted, there is a larger setback of 20 feet from the 10. There is an area to the north of the Carfix that can only be 7 stories maximum. And then there is a tapered setback from Whitaker Mill Road, ranging from 25 feet to 5 feet, shown in red there. Next slide. And then the second scenario, if the building is 10 stories or taller, the committee, when the committee voted, this was the language, a 10-foot setback, and then a 9-story height maximum surrounding that corner parcel, and then another small step back on Whitaker Mill. Next slide. And today, after the changes, there's a change to the setback on the east side, making that bigger, and then a couple other new zones of height maximums, 3, 7, and 9, sort of different locations around that corner parcel. Next slide, please. There was also an addition of some language explaining that this case does exempt itself from cross-access standards. So the UDO would require offers of cross-access to that corner parcel where the Carfix is, and they still exempt from that. They did add some language that does not preclude them from coming to some agreement, although from staff point of view, this really doesn't make any substantial changes to the legality or the requirements that staff will require at site plan. So clarification, but didn't really do much in terms of enforcement from the city side. Next slide, please. So inconsistent with the future land use map still, but consistent with the plan overall and consistent with urban form. And like I said, your deadline is tomorrow. And the same issue has been with the case that staff thinks that cross access would be beneficial for the area. As the chairperson mentioned, the comment period for this is closed since it's old business, but I believe you should have received some email from both the residents on the Cotton Exchange Court and the owner of the Carfix about this particular set of changes. So I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mabel. We've already heard from the applicant. We've received numerous emails and we've been made aware of the neighborhood petition. But I understand that the applicant and members of the public are present. We would need to vote if we would like to hear from those in support and those in opposition a third time. By show of hands, how many commissioners are interested in hearing from both groups again? Any opposed? Okay, we had a vote that I saw 3 hands went up in support of opening the floor again. Please note, members of the public, if you're here to sign up, I do acknowledge I've seen your names previously and we do read your emails and we have been made aware of the petition. We're going to pull this back to the table and have a little bit of conversation. I'd now like to allow for questions and comments from the commissioners. Does anyone have any questions or comments? No? Commissioner Lampman?
I'm just trying to get a little bit of clarification again, just if I can recap for my own benefit here. If it's over 10 stories, then those side lots will be shorter. If it's under 10 stories, they don't have that requirement, or was there another shortened height?
This is Ira. It was not to the same degree. So the 10 stories had an area of 7-story maximum that was present in both.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the dimensions are a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
The 10-story scenario also had a 3-story max to the east, which was not present in the other one. Mm-hmm. So I would say as the taller of the two had more height restrictions closer to the corner parcel than the other one. Although the step back for the 9-story or less was larger on all sides. So it's not really a clean break as to which one offers more mitigation or not. they're different for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mabel. Do any other commissioners have questions for the applicant or staff? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. Commissioner McIntosh?
I move to recommend denial of rezoning case Z 2220 East End Market PD. The rezoning request is not reasonable and in the public interest because the proposal as currently designed is inconsiderate of existing residents and businesses. It does not meet the goals of the comprehensive plan and it's inconsiderate of existing residents and businesses.
Thank you for your motion. Do I have a second? Commissioner Winters?
Second.
Apologies, Vice Chair Winters. Thank you for your second. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any additional questions or debate on the merits of the motion? Commissioner McIntosh?
I'm sorry. Could I add a couple things? I hadn't prepared a motion and I was just adding it on the fly. It's incompatible with the surrounding area. And does not provide sufficient open space.
Thank you for your,
yeah, sorry.
that's okay. Thank you for your clarification. Is there anything else to add? Okay. Vice Chair Winters, does your second still stand with the, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. I would like to ask Chinitha for a roll call of members to record their individual votes. At the end of the roll call, I will announce the outcome of the vote.
Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair Fox,
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman,
Aye.
Commissioner Mann,
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver, recused, I'm sorry. Commissioner Rains,
Nay.
Vice Chair Winters,
Aye.
The motion passes 6-1.
I'm
I'm sorry.
present as well.
We missed Commissioner Miller, Ms. Chinitha.
I apologize, I didn't realize she had come in. All right,
Yes.
and Commissioner Miller.
Nay.
Q.
The motion passes 6-2. Moving on to item E.2, case number Z4420, TCZ 320. This is a request to change the zoning conditions associated with the property that is approximately 27 acres in size. The parcel is located at 3513 Garner Road. The request has been discussed at the April 13th meeting and was deferred to allow the applicant to consider additional zoning conditions. At that meeting, we requested the applicant consider buffering and/or building type changes. The applicant has not offered any additional conditions, and the request is unchanged from our last discussion. When we last reviewed the item, there was a discussion about street connections and additional buffering. Both staff and the applicant have provided a presentation, and we have heard from the public. Since the request has not changed, I would like to ask if any commissioners have questions. Staff and the applicant are available to answer questions. Commissioner Bennett?
Thank you, Chair Fox. I'd just like to ask the applicant why there weren't any changes. You know, did they consider it and come to that conclusion based on some reason?
Thank you for your question. Ray, can we please pull the applicant off of mute?
sorry, was that for Z22?
That is Z4420, that's TCZ 320.
All right, 1 second. My list disappeared. All right, Randy.
Ah, there we go. Thank you, Commissioner Bennett. We did look at the possibility of adding additional buffering, but when we went back and looked in the UDO, because there's going to be a significant amount of preserved area on this property, we went back and looked at the tree save requirements. And my understanding is that the tree save requirements are going to require us to have a 65-foot tree conservation buffer along the south end, bordering on all those occupied properties in Garner. And so because there's already going to be a required 65-foot buffer under the UDO, we thought that was already a pretty significant buffer, and there was no need to have any additional commitment on that.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any additional questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner O'Haver?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up to Commissioner Bennett's question. So the buffering, there's 65-foot buffering to the south, stand along those residential lots. What is the orientation of the proposed development? And to be oriented towards Tryon Street?
Yeah, so I have slides that we maybe can pull up that could answer some of that.
If there's a desire to hear additional comment or allow the applicant presentation time, we would need to vote to grant time for all opponents and proponents. Without objection, I'd like to grant 4 minutes to each side. Seeing none, please allow the presentation, and then we'll move on to the any public who have signed up to speak on this matter. Commissioner O'Haver?
Yeah, I would like to just make sure I'm asking the applicant to sort of focus on that orientation question specifically. So just a reminder there. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
All right, so I sent in my slides. Do we have those?
I don't have those slides. Did you email those to me or Carmen?
I emailed them. I emailed them to Matthew Clem.
Okay, I'll work on getting those.
The short answer is that the developable area on the property is almost all located on the far west end, near where Tryon Road stubs off. There's a large stream that runs kind of diagonally from the northwest to the southeast through the property. So between the stream itself and the stream buffers, there's a small amount of developable area at the far east end, and there's a even smaller amount kind of on the south in the middle of the property. But almost everything that's developable is on the far west end near Tryon Road. The intent is to extend Tryon Road through the property long ways from the west to the east. So that'll provide a thoroughfare through the property, and there can be development on along that. But again, most of the middle part of the property is just going to be undevelopable. Hopefully that is helpful without being able to see the visual.
question of staff, are we able to pull up the visual? Do you have that receipt yet?
The email that was sent did not include the link, so we don't have the presentation, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Fox, this is Don Velk. I do have a slide that would illustrate a point that Mr. Herman was making just now, if I could bring that up.
That would be great. Thank you, Mr. Belk. Commissioner Bennett, do you have a question?
I just wanted to note that the clock is still running.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was about 2:40 when we started talking.
Thank you for that.
We reset the clock, and then Mr. Belk, if you can share that image, that would be helpful.
Thank you. JP, could you bring up the slide presentation, please? And one more slide, please. This is a close-up of the site, 3513 Garner Road. And the point that Mr. Herman was trying to make was that this site is significantly constrained by environmental features. What is shown on the map in the lighter colors are the hydrate soils. Within that area is a USGS Blue Line stream, some jurisdictional wetlands, and steep slopes. You can see on the western portion of the property, there are no such constraints.
Thank you, Mr. Belk. That's very helpful. Did the applicant want to use the remainder of their time, or would you like to defer your time?
I'll defer my time. I think that answers the question.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moderator, I believe we have one member of the public signed up to speak. Can we unmute Mr. Robert Opton?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for giving me the time to speak. First, I will say that the issue of setbacks, even though it wasn't addressed, is a moot point when we're talking about building apartments. Condition number 2, the condition this developer seeks to remove explicitly forbids the building of apartments. Adjusting setbacks is not solving that issue. It's an attempt by this developer to bend the will of the commission so that the developer can make good on a bad land deal at the surrounding community's expense. The 30-year comprehensive future land use map, plan, and policies have been laid out in order to promote responsible and thoughtful development, as well as protect communities from these exact kinds of requests. And again, this request violates the policies LU 5.6, the buffering requirements that were not addressed, and LU 8.5, the conservation of single-family home neighborhoods. These policies are not frivolous, they are meaningful. And when policies are passed by the council, residents expect this commission to follow and uphold them, not toss them aside because the developer does not do their due diligence when purchasing property. Why does policy exist if it's tossed aside every time a developer decides it doesn't like the zoning of land it purchased? The surrounding neighborhoods are thriving. Garner Road is experiencing multiple development projects as we speak. This area is not wanting for housing. This is not an area in need of revitalization. There are 60-plus-year communities here that are cared for and continuing to grow. And denying this request will not prohibit this developer from building on this land. It only forces them to build in a way that both the communities, commission, and council deemed appropriate just 2 years ago. I purchased a home in Cloverdale in April 2020. I did my homework, saw that the land was zoned for residential development. That is totally fine. But I only purchased in this neighborhood because I saw that Raleigh City Council had created condition number 2 in just 2019, forbidding the building of apartments. I and my fellow community members, and indeed the citizens of Wake County, have the reasonable expectation that a zoning decision will last longer than 2 years in a 30-year plan. Please keep in mind we're having this debate only because the developer wants a higher profit margin at the very real expense of the surrounding communities. Connecting roads into Cloverdale to accommodate apartment overflow parking is dangerous and untenable. Garner neighborhoods do not exist to serve as Raleigh apartment parking lots. I reiterate, this request is dangerous, and granting this request would disrespect long-standing communities and erode public trust in this commission, to say the least. This developer's request is quite simply inappropriate. I am not opposed to developing the land in question. In fact, thoughtful and responsible development can be extremely positive. But I urge this commission to deny this request to remove condition number 2. This request is not thoughtful, it is not respectful, it is purely motivated by profit. The developer has not presented any meaningful plans to the commission, and it violates meaningful policy that was set in place just 2 years ago into a 30-year plan. So please, I urge you, deny the request to remove condition number 2. I thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Otten. Moderator, are there any additional members of the public signed up to speak?
That's all I have at this time.
Excellent, thank you. Commissioner O'Haver?
Yes, I've got another question for staff. I want to make sure I remember our conversation from the last meeting. I'd like to confirm that this request is not increasing density. It is not increasing height. And the current buffering requirements are equal to the proposed building type, so there will be no adverse effect to the required buffering that is in place now. Were all of those correct statements?
The density is, this is Commissioner O'Haver, this is Don Belk. The density by condition is set at 6 units to the acre. That will not change. The maximum height in the R10 district would be 45 feet or 3 stories. And the setback from the rear lot line would be 20 feet.
So, Mr. Belk, then it sounds like this building type, the apartment building type, is allowed to be closer, I guess, for lack of a better word, to the rear setback, to the rear property line. Is that correct? I understood from our last meeting that requirements on the building types were the same.
Yes, for the apartment building type, the rear lot line setback is 20 feet. I'm not exactly sure how this would tie into tree conservation requirements. I would need to consult with one of our urban foresters, but that would be the minimum, 20 feet.
Sorry, maybe I'm not sure I'm clear, Mr. Belk. I'm sorry to ask this point again, but it's an important one for me, so I want to make sure I got it right. My understanding from the last meeting, and it sounds like I misunderstood, is that if we approve this rezoning, the apartment building type could then be built closer than what is currently allowed. Is that correct? I.e., the townhome buffering and setback is more restrictive than the apartment building type buffering and setback. Is that correct?
I'm checking the UDO now, Commissioner O'Haver, and the setback, the rear lot line setback under the townhome building type would also be 20 feet for a duplex. Would also be 20 feet, and for a detached house, again, 20 feet.
Okay, thank you.
This is Travis. If I could offer just a bit of clarification here. Don's right. The rear yard setback would be identical between the two building typologies. I want to go back to an earlier question about the tree conservation. I know we've got Zach Manor on the line, and he can jump in when I'm done and correct me if I've misstated anything. But my understanding is that if and when Tryon Road is extended through this site, that will be classified as a thoroughfare. And the way that tree conservation works in the UDO is there are different levels of tree save, different areas of importance. And the area directly adjacent to a thoroughfare is a higher level of importance than the perimeter of the property. So my understanding is that if Tryon is extended, the trees would be located adjacent to Tryon Road. They would also be located adjacent to any blue line stream. Those are higher priorities for tree safe area. And those would take precedence over any buffering that would happen to the southern property line. Again, I would welcome Zach to correct me if I've misstated that.
Is there any additional comment from staff?
Sorry, had a technical difficulty. No, Travis is correct there. I have nothing to add. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Manor. Commissioner O'Haver, does that answer your questions?
It does, but it raises another one, Chair Fox, sorry.
Go right ahead.
These points are important for me to understand which way I want to go on this. So I just want to make sure I'm clear. So I apologize to my fellow commissioners if I'm wearing you out with this question. I understood from the applicant that they were going to be required to save 65 feet to the south, but I just heard that that might not necessarily be the case from staff, i.e. primary TCA is going to be along the stream and along Tryon Road. And so if that is the case, then I'm going to be concerned then that the applicant did not come back with some additional buffering requirements, because their response to Ms. Bennett's question was that 65 feet along the south, which I would agree, if that was required, that is considerable buffering. But I think I just heard from staff that is not necessarily the way it's going to go down. Somebody explain that just a little bit more for me, please.
So we've attempted to explain the way the ordinance works and how the different tree save areas are prioritized without sitting down and really measuring out these different areas. It's hard for staff to confirm exactly where the 10% trees will be located. However, based on our look at the understanding of the ordinance as just explained by Travis and Zach, and the dimension of the property, it seems very unlikely to us that you could first do the thoroughfare, then the stream buffers, and have enough left over for another 65 feet on the backside of the property. That doesn't seem like that would be the case. So we take some issue with the representation.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers.
Mr. Bowers, yeah, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
Are there any additional questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Rains, and then I saw Commissioner Bennett's hand.
Thanks, Chair Fox. Just a clarification, picking up on what Commissioner O'Haver asked, what is considered a front lot line? Is that off of Cyrus Street, or is that some other designation with a 5-foot setback? Is that the west side? What I guess I'm asking staff, what's considered the front yard in this lot?
We have, and I'll let some of my colleagues weigh in, but just looking at this and the orientation of the future Tryon Road, our assumptions are, my assumption is that future development would maybe fronted on Tryon, but not necessarily, not open access. There would be access streets coming off of that. So those, the future orientation of the development, of course, is not known at this time, but we have looked at the southern boundary more or less as what would be the rear along any development that would occur on the future of the south side of Tryon Street. So the southern property line would constitute, in that situation, the rear of a lot that would be built in that location.
So
Commissioner Rains, does that answer your question? Or Mr. Bowers, would you
I
like
just
to?
wanted to say that given, with the apartment building type, we don't know at this point, or at least I don't believe we know, whether Burton's Barn Street will be extended, which kind of provides for these on the development just to the west of this. They've developed with the reverse frontage typology, which is permitted. However, if that street's not extended, you could, with the apartment building type, subdivide apartment lots that have only frontage on Tryon Street because there are no other access points on the south side. And so then in that case, the primary street would be Tryon. Without a development plan and seeing how the streets would lay out, it's really kind of impossible for staff to give a definitive answer. All we can tell you is that there are standards for what is considered the primary street, and the apartment building type is treated like more like commercial buildings in terms of how it's fronted than in the sense that it generally orients towards a larger and busier street, although there's some nuance in there, than the residential types such as townhouse and attached and detached buildings, where the code gives deference to more local streets for determining what is primary. I hope that kind of answers the question.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. Commissioner Bennett, I see you had a question.
Thank you. I was just going to thank Commissioner O'Haver for those questions because it helped me, and thank staff for the conversation. It helps to clarify and make me feel better about, I'm not going to support this. And I'm not going to support it, number one, on principle, as I mentioned at the last meeting. But the conversation sort of confirmed for me that it's more than just the principle. However, I do want to restate the principle just so it's on the record that I am not comfortable with the rezoning coming back in 2 years to remove a condition that likely is the reason it got approved in the first place. I don't know this applicant. I don't want to assume any motivation on the applicant's part at all. It could strictly be a market decision. However, I just see the potential for that to be abused, and I don't think it's fair or transparent to the process or for the community. And so for that reason, I'm not going to be able to support this rezoning.
Thank you, Commissioner Bennett. Commissioner O'Haver,
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion.
please go ahead.
And before I do so, I just want to make a couple of quick comments. Initially, I was in favor of this until we dug in a little bit more, and I'm disappointed that there wasn't some attempts for the additional buffering requirements, hearing what we just heard. Ms. Bennett and I have had some conversations about this. I'm going to deny it mostly for the buffering and the adjacencies and the impact on the adjoining communities. I've stated before that I think it's difficult for applicants to look into the future and be expected to understand market forces even a year into the future. If you rewind a year from today, I think we would all be surprised at where we are now. But Ms. Bennett and I have talked about this, and we understand each other's positions on that. But all of that being said, I'm going to recommend denial of rezoning case Z4420-TCZ 320. Zoning request is not reasonable in the public interest. It disregards the specific policies of LU 5.6 buffering requirements and LU 8 conservation of single-family neighborhoods.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Haver. I would like to offer a second to that motion and say it does pain me to prohibit apartment style buildings, as I do feel like it is a burden to low income families. However, for the reasons you stated and for the reasons that Commissioner Bennett stated, I would like to second your motion. So we have a motion by Commissioner O'Haver and I have seconded the motion. Is there any additional comment or would you like to debate the merits of the motion? Mr. York?
Yes, if we could get a clarification on the comp plan consistency. I was listening for it. You mentioned 2 policies, but there wasn't really a general comment. If you could make that. And again, just because you're making a motion to deny does not mean you have to find it inconsistent with the comp plan or the future land use map.
Sorry, Mr. York. Back up and see if I can find it. Well, it appears that the case is consistent with the comp plan, but I feel that future land use map, but I feel like it's not in public interest due to those inconsistent policies. Is that adequate?
That's sufficient, sir, and my second still stands. Is there any additional conversation from commission members?
I was just gonna let everybody know, for some reason today, my PDFs are pulling up weird, so if I screwed that up, I'm sorry. Something's going on wacky here, so just FYI for the future, so.
No worries, sir. At this point, we have a motion and a second, and I will ask Shanifa for a roll call of members to record their individual votes. At the end of the roll call, I will announce the outcome of the vote.
Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair Fox?
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman?
Aye.
Commissioner Mann?
Nay.
Commissioner McIntosh?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
I'm sorry?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Haver?
Aye.
Commissioner Rains?
Aye.
Vice Chair Winters?
Aye.
The motion passes 8-1. Moving on to item E.3, this is case number Z5420. Without objection, the recusal of Commissioner Rains remains on this case. This is a request to rezone approximately 1 acre of land near the southwest corner of Hargett and Harrington Streets. The property is currently zoned downtown mixed-use 12-story shopfront to downtown mixed-use 40 stories conditional use. We discussed this request at the April 13th meeting, where the applicant was asked to consider additional conditions that would mitigate the impact of the parking structure on adjacent properties and provide active uses at the street level. The applicant has offered additional conditions. I would like to ask for a brief update from Ira Mabel.
Good morning again. That was a pretty good recap. We could jump to just the next slide already. So this is a reminder of the site location in downtown and some other landmarks. Next slide. So there were a few issues raised last time about the parking structure. The first was there is not a frontage included in the request, and an urban frontage would require the ground story of a parking structure to have active uses. So the applicant has included basically the verbatim that language in the UDO that would require it in the shopfront frontage otherwise. So that's condition number 5 there. Next slide. And then there was a lot of comments raised from nearby residents about the screening of the parking deck. Pardon me. And so a couple months ago, I want to say February maybe, the Urban Design Center staff gave a presentation to City Council about some research that they had been doing about parking deck screening around the city. And as part of that, they had developed some template new language to include in the text change to enhance the requirements for parking deck screening in the UDO. So that text change, I believe, has been authorized, but the language is still drafted, has not gone through the text change process yet. But I did share that with this applicant, and they have included quite a bit of it, although not all of it. This new language in number 6 there, the detail of the design of the screenings, pretty detailed. I'd be happy to go through that. It is in your backup if you care to read it. It includes like the square inches that a gap can be in a screen. And then number 7 is talking about internal light sources, and does include protection from both the right-of-way, which is currently how the UDO regulates light usually, and also adjacent parcels. So I believe Carter Pettibone from the EDC is available should you have specifics about that language or how it was reached by them, and how what the applicant has submitted fits with what their thinking is. Next slide. So this case, the consistency has not changed, consistent with the plan and the future land use map and reform map. Next slide, please. This set of policies is the same from last time. The next slide shows a couple of policies that were inconsistent, really about that active use on the ground floor of parking decks. So those move from the inconsistent column to the consistent column. There isn't really a policy in the comp plan that talks very much about screening. That had not been a policy issue anyway, raised in the plan, so that's unchanged. And the next slide just shows the inconsistent policies, which is now minus the active uses on the ground floor parking structures, leaves the infill compatibility policy, which is really a matter of height compared to the surrounding development. Yep. So your deadline for action is in June. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mabel. We have previously heard from the applicant team. If we would like to receive another presentation, we would need to vote to allow additional time. Conversely, we can forego another applicant presentation and can ask questions of the applicant team. So with a formal ask, by show of hands, how many commissioners are interested in hearing from both those in support and those opposed to this case? We have one, and those opposed to granting additional time? Okay. So we will move forward without granting additional time, but acknowledge that we've received numerous emails, including images and attachments that have been sent by the public, and we've been able to review all that information. So pulling it back to the table, I would ask for any questions or comments from commissioners. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Seeing none, I would like to entertain a motion. Commissioner O'Haver,
I'd like to make a motion.
please go ahead, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval, case Z 5420. Zoning case is consistent, future land use map and consistent with relevant policies. Furthermore, it is reasonable in the public interest. Specific policies, policy LU 1.2, future land use map and zoning consistency. Policy LU 2.6, zoning and infrastructure impact. Policy LU 4.6, transit-oriented development. Policy LU 4.7, capitalizing on transit access. Policy LU 4.8, station area land uses. Policy LU 8.10, infill development. Policy UD 7.3, design guidelines. Policy DT 1.3, underutilized sites in downtown. Policy DT 1.16, high density development.
Thank you, sir. Do we have a second? Commissioner Bennett?
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a motion and a second. Is there any additional conversation or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, I will ask Shanitha for a roll call of the vote.
Let's see. And before I do that, verify also Mr. Raines is recused from this one?
Yes, ma'am,
Correct?
he is.
Thank you. All righty. Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair Fox?
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman?
Aye.
Commissioner Mann?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver?
Aye.
Vice Chair Winters?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Moving on to new business, there are 5 items listed under new business portion of the agenda. These requests have not appeared on a previous Planning Commission agenda, and we will hear a full staff presentation and applicant presentation. Per earlier in the agenda, we have deferred case number Z6920 to a future agenda to allow the applicant additional time to create conditions. Moving on to item F.2, that's case number Z421. This is a request to rezone approximately 7 acres of land at 3425 Rock Quarry Road from residential 6 with special highway overlay district 1 to residential mixed use 4 stories conditional use. This item appeared on the agenda at the last meeting, but was not discussed due to time constraints. This is the first time we will hear and discuss this request. I would like to ask for a staff presentation from Don Belk.
Thank you, Chair Fox. Good morning, commissioners. As stated, this is a request at 3425 Rock Quarry Road. This request would remove the SHOD 1 designation. The second neighborhood meeting was held in March, and your deadline for action is June the 7th. As shown here, the zoning is predominantly R6. However, the mixed use area to the south is from a 2019 rezoning case, and the NX3 to the north and the CX to the west. An aerial view showing the residential density, the low density residential to the north. This property is a portion of a larger property by the Redeeming Missionary Baptist Church. And note the proximity to I-40 and the Beltline. And a closer view. Next slide, please. Some perspectives, Sunnybrook Road, the view from north and south. And this is a perspective from within the Sunnybrook neighborhood to the north from Stony Springs Drive looking south into the site. Next slide. The condition proposed is for a maximum of 140 dwelling units to be developed. Next slide. The differences here, again, removal of the SHOD in the proposed zoning, The density would equate to 22 units to the acre. The maximum units is set by condition. Setbacks would remain the same. Under the proposal, there would be an entitlement for 4,000 square feet of office and also for retail. Under our carbon emission analysis, the site did rate out at a lower walk score and transit score than the city's average. However, higher on the aspect of smaller and more efficient units would be permitted. The site is served presently by Route 17 Rock Quarry. However, the site is located about a quarter of a mile from Rock Quarry. The affordability analysis, it would add to the housing supply, and it would permit a variety of housing types with smaller lots than the citywide average. As mentioned, it is just at the quarter-mile distance from transit. It does not include subsidized units. However, our understanding is that this would be a low-income housing tax credit project. The requested residential mixed-use 4-story conditional use is consistent with a community mixed-use future land use map designation. Overall, it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and consistent with the future land use map. Noted these conditional policies. One inconsistent policy we found was LU 5.6 buffering requirements, given the proximity of the residential units to the north. Again, your deadline for action is June the 7th. Again, consistency with policy LU 5.6 could be improved with specific buffering measures. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Belk. Next, I would like to hear from Isabel Maddox, representing the applicant. The applicant and all those in support have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Isabel Maddox here on behalf of South Creek Holdings LLC. The applicant also on the line with me is Charlie Heritage of South Creek, and I believe Pastor Mark Gibson of Redeeming Love Missionary Baptist Church, the current property owner, may also be on the line. As Don indicated, this case seeks to rezone approximately 7 acres to RX4 conditional use to permit 140 senior affordable housing dwelling units. South Creek is an affordable housing developer, and they're under contract with the church to buy 7 acres of this site. If you can go to my presentation, I don't know if Don is controlling it or whoever's controlling Ray. I did submit a presentation which I can show you the portion of the Redeeming Missionary Church that we're acquiring. Can you pull that up? It appears not. Anyway, the church has a rather large property, and they use a fairly small portion of that. And last year, when the same developer, South Creek, was going through a rezoning process for a parcel adjacent to the church property, my client, Charlie Heritage, got to know Pastor Mark Gibson, and they started talking. And from that came an agreement that maybe the church could sell some of its excess land that was kind of between the area where the actual church proper is located and Sunnybrook, and to do a senior affordable housing development. And so they have agreed on a contract for South Creek to acquire some land from Redeeming Love Missionary Baptist Church. And I think that will work very well. This case is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map. We did remove the SHOD here because it's not really very applicable. The SHOD applies to these broad areas, but it only really requires treatment adjacent to the thoroughfare, in this case I-40. We do not abut I-40, so it's not really very relevant to be applicable here. We've had two neighbors meetings, no strong objections, stated at those meetings. We've had a few neighbors show up. I think Mr. Heritage met with some neighbors subsequent to our last neighbor meeting, and they were requesting a fence, but there will be a fence in connection with our neighborhood transition. Oh, here we are. So go to the second slide, if you would. Okay, so you can see there the area in green is the property that is going to be acquired by South Creek, and you'll see in red that's the property that will be retained by the church. And you can see there's a good distance away from I-40, so we wouldn't be required to comply with any SHOD rules given this the location of this tract. And so we just took it off so it would not be confusing. But you'll see to the south of our parcel is where an affordable family development was approved just last year. And this is a senior development that's going to be proposed in the green area. So, as this is a tax credit deal, and tax credit deals are required to be within proximity to grocery, pharmacy. This one is on transit line, and it's walkable to a number of amenities. We do think that, obviously we do have a time constraint. We had hoped to get out of Planning Commission last meeting, but it just didn't get to us. So now, normally there's a May 14th deadline to get zoning approval, and we had a mathematical chance of getting that if we had been voted out of Planning Commission then. Now we've got an extension to May 28th, and we think we still could get there if we can get a little help from council to put us on the public hearing agenda ASAP. But we think this case, is certainly in the public interest, provides the public benefit of affordable housing. We think there's some good synergies to put a senior development right beside a family development, so families can keep an eye on the grandparents, and the grandparents can keep an eye on the kids. But when they need to go back home to their respective places, they've had enough with each other, they can do that. So we think this is a good use for this property, and we would request your support today, and certainly available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Maddox. I believe we have 2 members of the public signed up in support. Mr. Moderator, if you could unmute our speakers.
Yep, looks like I just have one present. Odafole Okwe.
Good morning, all. This is Odafole Okwe. Thank you for the correct pronunciation of my name. I appreciate it. Yes, so initially, to the former speaker's point, our neighborhood, or my neighbors and myself, didn't really have any strong objections. Interestingly enough, I did not get the notice about the changes until like a week after the first meeting with the builders took place. But after attending, speaking with the builders, and then doing a little research, we actually support the neighborhood being built because based on that research, we found that long-term that will actually help our property values. The only objection that myself and my neighbors seem to vehemently object to is the idea of a through street being built. So I'm not sure if you're able to pull up that the map, but I'm at the end of Stony Spring Drive. So I'm the last townhome, and directly across from me is a single family home with my neighbor, Brian Andrews. He has 2 daughters and a wife, and the daughters play outside pretty regularly. And he has like one of those slow down signs. So obviously speeding is a problem, even though we're at the end of the street, and we can only imagine that creating a through street would be problematic for that by allowing outside traffic to connect. We also find that that's not necessary, considering that I will say for myself, I intentionally did not buy off of a main road because I didn't want to be connected. I didn't like the idea of someone just passing my home, just passing by and saying that they were in the neighborhood. It's very intentional. You have to come to the end of my street to be looking for me. So there is a way for the neighborhood to connect to. I mean, it's basically right off of Rock Quarry Road, but if it needs to connect to Sunnybrook, there is a way to do that, especially because the other community is planning to be built. The builder Charlie that we spoke with is not interested in building that as well. So it's kind of like I wasn't really sure what to put as far as being in support or against it. Overall, we're in support of the project, but we are against that one aspect, and we would ask that that's not a requirement because it's not necessary.
Madam
Right,
Chair,
actually-
if I can speak to that.
I was going to say, I actually do have the second speaker as well.
Let's go ahead with the second speaker, and then we will go back to allow Ms. Maddox to answer.
All right, the second speaker is Mark Gibson.
Good morning to you, Madam Chair, and to the commissioners. Can you all hear me?
Yes, Mr. Gibson, we can.
Okay, wonderful. I just wanted to come on in support of this project. It was indeed a part of phase 3 of our long-range plan for our church, was to build some affordable senior housing in the area. And then talking with Charlie and South Creek, as they had acquired the property adjacent to us, we sort of talked about what plans we had for that property. And it just so lined up that this was something that just fell in line with what our vision was. And so they were willing to do it, and we had the property to do it, and they would manage it, and that's fine. And so, even what we thought and visioned for that space is going to come to fruition. So who does it, who builds it, is really not that concerning to me, but that to have that opportunity to have the senior housing there. And so on behalf of our church, we're delighted to see this come to this area, and we are in strong support of this. South Creek has been wonderful to work with up to this point, and looking forward to a great relationship between us and South Creek.
Thank you, sir. There is no one signed up in opposition to the request, so I would now like to allow for questions and comments from commissioners. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Commissioner Miller?
I'd like to hear Ms. Maddox's response to the question about the street.
Well, as you know, streets are required to be connected in Raleigh. That's just one of the requirements when you do a development. And so there is a stub to Stony Spring to our north, and the family development was planning to build a street that would stub to this property, and now the ultimate would be a connection all the way through. As I said, that's generally a requirement by city planning under the UDO, and so my client probably would like to avoid the expense of that, but at this point, I don't think we can condition it out of the case.
Commissioner Reins?
Question for the applicant, Chair Fox. For the transitions to the adjacent low-density residential, could they clarify or offer any potential conditions for transitional yards to those adjacent properties to the north and west, and also south, I guess, from the lot?
Madam Chair.
Please go
Can I
ahead, Ms.
speak?
Maddox.
Yes, we will be required to have the first two parts of a neighborhood transition adjacent to the north, because we will have a mixed use adjacent to an I think it's an R6. Because we will keep that building height in that location under 50 feet, we won't have as wide of a buffer, but we will have a fence, a solid fence, and a 10 or 20 foot buffer there. So we do think we're going to be well buffered. As far as buffering, I have a site plan that if you could pull up, it's my slide number 3, which shows you kind of what our proposed layout is. It does create a decent buffer on both the south and the north. So that's kind of our proposed layout right there. And so it doesn't really show the landscaping on the north, but we'll be required to do that under the neighborhood transition rules in section 3.5 of the UDO, which requires, a 10 or 20 foot planted area with either a wall or a solid wood fence. As far as the family project to the south, that's also a mixed use zoning, so that neighborhood transition won't be required, but I think just because of the way the site's laid out, there will be some landscaping there in between those two developments.
Thank you, Ms. Maddox. Commissioner Rains, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Are there any additional questions? Commissioner O'Haver?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that site plan up. As we've said before, that's always helpful. Can the applicant explain, it looked like, I guess I had just assumed that there was going to be access either to Sunnybrook, Rock Quarry, but it looks like the access was along an extension of Stony Spring Drive, but I did not see where that extension tied in. Is that heading through the church property back down to Rock Quarry Road?
Yeah, there will be an access on Sunnybrook. Oh, I agree. This doesn't show it. I'm a little bit. I'm sort of looking at my own plan, but my expectation has been the access would come out on Sunnybrook. But there will be that access that comes through the family development, and Charlie Heritage was supposed to be on the line. It didn't sound like he was. Ray, did he log in today?
I don't have him on here.
Okay. Mr. O'Haver, I'm sorry to not be able to answer this better. It's been my understanding that our access would come off Sunnybrook. We also have an alternative access down to Rock Quarry through the family development. But I acknowledge that this site plan doesn't look like that, but I apologize for not knowing a better answer than that.
That's okay. We're not making a decision necessarily on that site plan. So,
yeah.
But could staff confirm that they're requiring that connection from Rock Quarry to Stony Spring Drive?
Good morning. This is Ann Conlon with Transportation. Yes, staff would be looking for the connection through this development and the development to the south, which is currently under review, and showing that extension of Stony Springs Drive to connect it down to Rock Quarry Road.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Bennett, and then I see Commissioner Lampman afterwards.
Thank you, Chair Fox. Could Ms. Conlon comment on the impacts of that extension of Stony Springs to Rock Quarry? I'm just thinking about what the caller was saying. I'm assuming Stony Springs that's a residential street. Now it's connecting to Rock Quarry Road. Do you anticipate, adverse impacts of traffic going through that neighborhood, and I guess the two new neighborhoods as well? And is there any type of condition or something that we can do to mitigate those impacts if you foresee some?
For Commissioner Bennett, we believe that that connection is important to provide appropriate access to both the existing units and the new units. We've got about 300 units right now with only one access out to Sunnybrook, and our code requires an access point for every 150 units. So current access to that neighborhood is substandard. We certainly always want to mitigate impacts to residents along streets. And we're working really closely with our neighborhood traffic management program to proactively design streets so that we don't come back with a problem later. We've learned a lot from that program that we can design in from the beginning to prevent speeding issues in the future. So that occurs during the development review process. I am not sure if specific street design elements can be conditions. I'll ask my planning colleagues to speak to that aspect.
I think you can, in general, you're required to build the streets as per the cross sections that are provided in the UDO. And without a formally adopted plan that shows, like a streetscape plan that shows a different cross section, I don't believe you can propose a different cross section as a zoning condition, because that would be considered less restrictive than the code. So I think the general answer to that is that, and I'll look to David York if he has a different opinion, but I think the general answer is that there would have to be at least a local street built to the local street standards of the UDO connecting to this. Now, of course, the UDO does provide a relief mechanism from Chapter 8 standards, but that is a quasi-judicial hearing and specific findings would have to be met in order to get that relief.
Thank you both.
Commissioner Lampman, you had a question?
Yes, I have a slight advantage looking at what was published through the state agency for applications back in January, and they do have the extension there in their site plan. It's on the back end and the left. So all of the development will be closer to the Stony Brook Road side.
I would like to add that, obviously this is a very frequent topic that comes up, and streets are not stubbed to adjacent properties and left that way. That's always part of. In fact, the UDO even provides that one of the ways to make block perimeters is to provide stub streets. If a street is never to be extended, it's supposed to be terminated with some sort of turnaround, a cul-de-sac or a hammerhead. When that hasn't happened, and I wish there was a better understanding among the general public. When you see a street stubbing into an adjacent property and it just ends, that is a clear sign that someday that's supposed to be connected. And the other thing is that this development to the north is, which is single family and townhouse, a very, very large number of units to be accessed from a single point of access. And, we've had situations where access points can be blocked because a tropical storm blows a tree across it or something, and all of a sudden the entire neighborhood is cut off. The other thing from a traffic standpoint is that right now, if you live on those lots at the end of the lane there, Surbright Lane, I think, you get 100% of all the trips that are generated because there's only this one way out. By providing eventually 2 additional ways to get out of the neighborhood, traffic will drop in some parts of the neighborhood while potentially increasing in others, because now the people who live along the street that provides the sole means of ingress and egress are no longer subject to 100% of all the traffic that is generated by the neighborhood. So because now there's alternative means to get in and out, so that if your destination is closer to Rock Quarry Road than it is to Sunnybrook, you would take one of those access points as opposed to having to have the only option of coming out on Sunnybrook. So there's always a mixed bag, but the connection standards in the UDO are there for a very good reason, and that is to provide a redundancy in the street network. And this is particularly important when you have such a large number of homes accessed from a single connection.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Bowers. That was very helpful. Are there any additional questions or comments from commissioners? Seeing no other comment, I would like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Rains?
Commissioner Fox, I move to recommend approval of rezoning case Z421. The rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest because it is supported by the specific policies in the comprehensive plan. Policy LU 1.2, future land use map and zoning consistency. Policy LU 5.4, density transitions. Policy LU 6.2, complementary land use and urban vitality. Policy LU 8.1, housing variety. And policy H 1.8, zoning for housing.
Thank you,
Second.
sir. And Commissioner Mann is a second. So we have a motion on the table by Commissioner Rains and a second by Commissioner Mann. Is there any additional conversation or debate on the merits of the motion? Okay, seeing none, I will ask Shanitha for a roll call of members to record their individual votes.
Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair Fox,
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman,
Aye.
Commissioner Mann,
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver,
Aye.
Commissioner Rains,
Aye.
Vice Chair Winters.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Moving on to item F.3, that's case number Z521. This is a request to rezone approximately 1 acre of land from residential 4 to residential 10 conditional use. The property is located on the east side of Pearl Road, approximately a half-mile south of the intersection with Rock Quarry Road. This request has not been previously discussed. I would like to ask for a staff presentation from Ira Mabel.
Hello, good morning again. Just one thing to add, which is that your deadline is in the end of June for this case. Go to the next slide. So the rezoning down here on Pearl Road is pretty uniformly residential. You can see by all of the various shades of yellow. And the development pattern matches that, so different flavors of residential development in a couple of subdivisions south of Rock Quarry. That vertical strip without trees is a utility easement, electrical utility. And there is some zoning and land use change west past that, but pretty uniformly residential in this particular area. Next slide. Couple pictures of the site. So it is currently undeveloped. Or there, I don't think there's a structure on this one.
As I go back and look at the.
So it's wooded today. Okay, next slide. There is a single condition on this case. So the request is for R10, which would allow apartment and townhouse construction, but the density is limited to 6 units per acre, not 10. So the increase, 1 1/3 acre, increasing the number of units from 5 that could be built today to a total of 8 under the request. It is inconsistent with the future land use map, which is low density residential. So approval would change the map to moderate, which is the designation across Pearl Road for a pretty big section of land there. Consistent with policies about infill and housing. Slide. And the single inconsistent policy is about the future land use map being inconsistent. So this is just showing what the map would change to. Again, this is a state law requirement. So staff recommends a moderate density designation here. no other issues, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mabel. Next, I would like to hear from Toby Coleman, representing the applicant. The applicant has a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Chair Fox and Commissioners. Toby Coleman, 150 Fayetteville Street, here on behalf of the applicant, Sunnage Properties. This is a rezoning in short to permit more affordable housing types that aren't currently permitted in the R4 zoning. So, duplexes, triplexes, and other more affordable housing forms. Currently R4 zoning only permits detached homes, and even when you move to even when you look at the proposed missing middle text change, it only allows duplexes, so it doesn't allow anything more than that in R4. The proposal to rezone would permit more housing types, and particularly triplexes, et cetera, which under the UDO are either going to be deemed apartments or townhomes, depending on how you build them. And that's really only allowed right now in R10. And even under missing middle, you'd have to rezone this property to do those. I think it's useful to provide some quick background here because this is obviously a relatively small rezoning. This company is owned by a local doctor named Francis Aniquenzi. Dr. Aniquenzi bought this property a couple of years ago with the intention of building 6 to 8 units in triplexes or duplexes on the property. As can happen oftentimes with real estate investors, he didn't fully realize that there's some restrictions under the zoning until he bought it. And that he couldn't do it. But he's committed to doing it. And so we started talking about rezoning this property prior to the pandemic in February 2020. And at the time, I told him, look, let's see what the missing middle text change does. Council had just authorized it. I don't think any of us realized how long it would take to get through the process. But we looked to see whether that would happen. And over the last year, we've looked for every option to construct more affordable homes on this property. And unfortunately, I've encountered roadblocks under the code. I think staff has really tried to help us, but it's been there's just some challenge related to R4 zoning. One thing I'll just note is that we actually in January took got a variance so that a cottage court development of 6 to 8 small homes could be built on the property. If you're not familiar with cottage courts, those are restricted. You get a little bit more density, but the homes have to be smaller. Unfortunately, JP, if you could throw up the presentation and put it on one of the properties. If you look at the property, it's not shaped in a square. It's got sort of an odd shape. And as a result, the cottage court had to be sort of built in a line instead of around a common court. And staff has taken the position that you can't build a cottage court unless you have a common court that all the buildings surround. And so as a result, we came forward with this rezoning after sort of trying to work within the existing zoning. We have not heard any opposition. We did have a neighborhood meeting. We didn't have any opposition at that point. I don't know that there's anybody that signed up in opposition here. And finally, in future land, I don't think there's a lot to say about the future land use map consistency. The only reason that staff has determined, as I understand it, that this is inconsistent with the future land use map is because of the housing types that are permitted. So density, we've proposed a zoning condition that allows density of up to 6 units. That's consistent with the future land use designation. It's only that we're trying to get something beyond detached houses. That is accurate, that is currently the way that the comprehensive plan reads. Since you guys are a policymaking body, I'll just get on my soapbox for 2 seconds and say, I'm not sure that's consistent with the stated city policy now. So I agree that that's what it says in writing, but given the missing middle text change and everything else, I think that probably the city policy needs to change and maybe that provision needs to be considered being changed. So with that, happy to answer any other questions that folks may have.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. There's no one signed up in opposition to the request, so I'd like to allow for questions and comments from commissioners. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Commissioner Bennett?
Thank you. I have a couple questions and one comment. I don't think we are a policy-making body. I wish we were a policy-making body, but Toby, maybe you're speaking something into existence. But my couple of questions are,
Maybe I intended to say advisory body.
Oh. The staff report noted, and Toby, you alluded to this at the end, that, let's see, although proposed conditions limit the potential density of the site to 6 units per acre, no additional open space is included. And it said that the open space could make this more consistent. I'm trying to, 40% of the site to be dedicated to open space. So I guess my question is the applicant open to additional open space?
So there is going to be some just because of there is a portion of the Neuse River buffer that runs across the northeast portion of this site. I don't think it encompasses 40%. 40% out of 1.35 acres is a big chunk.
Yeah.
So I think I think we expect as a practical matter that there's going to be a significant chunk of open space, probably 10 to 20% just required due to buffers and other things. And if you look at the layout of the property, just the way that the property is laid out, if you have duplexes, triplexes, in fact, that'll actually create a little bit more open space than if you had detached houses. So that's also the goal there. But I think what we're, frankly, in part because the goal here is to do this and try to get the ability to build more affordable housing types. I think the hope is that we can do this without necessarily creating another hurdle that they have to jump through to develop on this site. And so that's why we have not proposed a specific open space requirement within the zoning conditions.
Okay. Chair Fox, may I ask my second question?
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Also from the staff report, it says there are many stubbed streets within the block. Extension of these stubs will greatly improve block perimeter. Let's see, extension of Forest Point Road would result in the Z521 site having a block perimeter of approximately 2,500 feet. So will extending these streets adversely affect traffic? And if not, is the applicant willing to do this to improve block perimeter?
I guess, again, JP, I don't know if it would help the commissioners, but I don't know if you guys have the map in front of you, but I think the main street you'd be talking about there is Forest Point Road. And I think the expectation is that we might be required by staff. If obviously you can sort of see there, it's sort of just, I don't know if that's even a stub per se. It's just sort of ends there. So I think the expectation is that there's probably going to be required to be a road extension along the southern portion of the site. And obviously that's going to eat up even more of the site. And so I think, I don't know that we need to commit to it per se within the zoning conditions, because I think it's going to be required. What we didn't ask for here, I'll note, is that you can ask sometimes for an exception from the block perimeter requirements. We have not asked for that. So, we are expecting that is probably going to be part of the site plan review and approval process, and are prepared to address that and are not asking for forgiveness from that at this point.
Okay, great.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
And did I see an additional hand up with a question? Commissioner O'Haver?
Commissioner Bennett beat it to me, and I was going to ask the same question in the spirit of a lot of comments that Commissioner Bennett makes about consistency. Since we just talked about that in the last case, I wanted to bring that up, but she beat me to it, so no further questions.
Thank you, sir. Are there any additional questions or comments from commissioners? Seeing none, I would like to entertain a motion. Commissioner McIntosh?
Thank you, Chair Fox. I move to recommend approval of rezoning case Z521 Pearl Road. The rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest because it is supported by these specific policies in the comprehensive plan. LU 8.1 housing variety LU 8.10 infill development, LU 8.12 infill compatibility, and H 1.8 zoning for housing.
Do we have a second? Commissioner O'Haver?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any additional comment or any debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, I will ask Shanitha for a roll call of the vote.
If I'm sorry to butt in. I just wanted to ask Mr. York if that motion satisfies the feature and land use map change.
We're indicating a change from what to what? It's not filled out on the recommendation language.
So staff analysis is that it's inconsistent with the map and would recommend a change to moderate density residential. But I think Chair Commissioner McIntosh, just if your motion includes that statement, then you're good to go.
Yes, and this will require a change to the future land use map from R4 low density residential to, or I'm sorry, from low density residential to medium density residential.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Haver, does your second still stand? Yes? Okay. I would like at this point to ask Shanitha for a roll call of the vote.
Okay. Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair Fox?
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman?
Aye.
Commissioner Mann?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver?
Aye.
Commissioner Rains?
Aye.
Vice Chair Winters?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. And moving on to item F.4, this is case number Z6120. This is a request to rezone approximately 2 acres of land on Rock Quarry Road. The request is filed by the City of Raleigh. The property is currently zoned office mixed use 3 stories conditional use and office mixed use 3 stories. The city requests a rezoning to office mixed use 3 stories. I'd like to ask staff for a staff presentation from Don Belk.
Thank you, Chair Fox. So greetings once again, commissioners. There was a second neighborhood meeting required for this case. It is a city-initiated rezoning. Your deadline is June 21st. It's surrounded predominantly by OX3 zoning. There is a portion of R10 to the north, other residential zoning further to the east and to the north as well. Perspective of the site showing the prevalence of institutional uses in the vicinity, particularly the North Carolina Correctional Center for Women, that is the state's largest such facility, the Southeastern YMCA, and the Beacon site located just down Rock Quarry Road near I-40. Next slide. Closer view of the site showing those facilities. Street perspectives along Rock Quarry Road, both north and south. Note the single family residential that is adjacent to the site on the north. There are no conditions proposed for this city initiated rezoning. The proposal would entitle an increase in the maximum number of units. Setbacks would remain the same. Slide. And there would be an increase in the entitlements of office square footage and retail square footage under this proposal. It scores higher than average in the walk and transit scores in our carbon emission analysis, and it would allow smaller and more efficient units. The site is served by two Go Raleigh routes, Route 5 and Route 17. It also scores well on the affordability analysis. This zoning entitlement would add to the housing supply and permit a variety of housing types. It is also served by transit. The request is consistent with the future land use map designation of public facilities and is consistent overall with the comprehensive plan. It is inconsistent with the urban form map. Rock Quarry Road is a transit emphasis corridor and no frontage has been specified for this proposal. Note the consistent policies, particularly the land reservation for community facilities, as well as the equitable distribution of those facilities. And again, the one inconsistent policy on frontage. Should note, however, that this rezoning is for the purpose of constructing a city fire station, and the functional requirements of the design of that proposed use would make the frontage, installation of frontage impractical. And also there are no other frontages along Rock Quarry in this area. Again, your deadline for action will be June 21st. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Belk. As mentioned, the city is the applicant on this case, and I understand that there are members of staff who are working on the parcel development with us today. I'd like to ask for a staff applicant presentation on this matter.
Good morning. This is Hannah Recka with Planning and Development. As Don mentioned, this is the city-initiated rezoning request. Go forward 2 slides. And the request is associated with a relocation of a City of Raleigh fire station, Fire Station 3. It is currently located at 13 Southeast Street. This project would relocate it to the subject site in order to build a larger facility and in order to improve the service coverage of this part of Raleigh. Next slide. The intent of the request is to apply one zoning district to a property that is currently split zoned, and also to apply a general use district. The current conditional use district that applies to this site, most of the site, includes conditions that are shared with the state prison property to the west and are intended to buffer that property. When applied to this site, they effectively reduce the buildable area on the property and make it challenging to build the needed facilities. So the request is to apply a general use district. Also on the line, I believe, is Priscilla Williams with Engineering Services. Can answer any questions you have about the project itself. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the request. Otherwise, I can leave the applicant comments to that.
Thank you, Ms. Reckow. Are there any questions for the staff applicant team? Seeing none, there's no one else signed up to speak on this matter. So if we have any questions or comments from either the staff review team or the staff applicant team, please be recognized to speak at this point. Seeing no questions or comments from commissioners, I would like to entertain a motion. Commissioner McIntosh.
Thank you, Chair Fox. I move to recommend approval of rezoning case Z621 Rock Quarry Road. The rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest and is supported by these specific policies in the comprehensive plan. Policy CS 1.3, land reservation for community facilities, and policy CS 1.4, equitable facility distribution.
Thank you for your motion. And Commissioner Miller?
Second.
We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner McIntosh and a second by Commissioner Miller. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, I will ask Shanitha for a roll call of the vote.
Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair Fox,
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman,
Aye.
Commissioner Mann,
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver,
Aye.
Commissioner Rains,
Aye.
Vice Chair Winters.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to the next item. For this item, I will need to recuse myself. So I will hand over the reins to Vice Chair Winters for a formal vote accepting my recusal and for the full facilitation of this item on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to entertain a motion to recuse Chair Fox from this item Z821. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Bennett. Do I have a second? Okay, Commissioner, I'm sorry, Miller. Thank you. So Commissioner, tongue-tied. Bennett has offered the motion. Commissioner Miller has offered the second. By show of hands, how many are in support? How many opposed? Okay, the motion passes 8-0. Okay, so we're at item F5, case number Z821. This is a request to rezone approximately 9 acres of land on Allen Grove Court and Michael J. Smith Lane. The request is to rezone from office mixed use, 3 stories, parking limited, to office mixed use 5 stories, parking limited, conditional use. After a staff presentation, those in support and those opposed will have 10 minutes to speak. First, I'd like to ask for our presentation from our staff member, Matt Clem.
Good morning, Vice Chair Winters and the Planning Commission. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right, great. Yep, so the request to rezone from OX3 PL to OX5 PL with conditions and the application of the transit-oriented development district. Your deadline for action is June 28th. Predominant zoning in the area is office mixed use, as is the property is currently zoned that way as well. Looking for additional height in the request. Next slide. A lot of office and institutional use here. In the upper left-hand corner of the map, you'll see the location of the WakeMed Raleigh campus. There is moderate density residential to the south and low density residential to the southwest of the site. You can also see the 2 lots included in the site. One is vacant and wooded, that's the northern site, and the southern site is currently developed with housing. Next slide. A view of that existing development on the southern site. Next slide. Looking at the northern site here, at one of the intersections, again, you can see that it's wooded. Next slide. Other intersection of the site. Slide. There is a zoning condition that prohibits the commercial parking lot use. Comparison of the zoning entitlement for the existing and proposed zoning. You see an increase of residential density and maximum unit yield here. The setbacks stay the same. Comparison of non-residential space, significant increases there as well. Next slide. There is a lower walk score than average for this site, but it has a higher transit score and provides for smaller, more efficient units. The site is currently served by a transit route that provides 15-minute service, which is among the most frequent transit service the city offers today. Next slide. Here we go. Looking at the Route 19 15-minute service on the site, and then of course about a half a mile or so from future BRT on New Bern Avenue. Next slide. We're adding supply of housing here by increasing the building height. There is no subsidized unit count required by the zoning conditions. The property owner and developer is CASA, which is an affordable housing provider in the region. Jess Brandis is on the line and will present their case. But again, there's nothing conditioned in the zoning that would require that, but she will speak to their intention to develop the site. It does maintain the variety of housing types of the apartment type building and townhome, which are generally more affordable than detached housing. Smaller lots than the citywide average are permitted here and is within walking distance of existing transit at the 15-minute frequency. Again, some of the best frequency we offer today, and then farther walking distance to BRT. Next slide. It's inconsistent, the request, with the Office Research and Development Future Land Use Map designation, which specifically recommends against housing in that district. If you remember a recent comprehensive plan amendment that was authorized by council, has authorized staff to look at that designation specifically. It is one of the only districts or designations on the future land use map that does not encourage housing as a permitted use. And I think we will be looking at that in a proposed amendment to the comprehensive plan, basically encouraging housing or permitting housing in these areas. So I believe the Planning Commission also recommended approval of that amendment to the future land use map unanimously. You may remember. Next slide. The request is consistent with the urban form map. You can see there are a number of streets that front the rezoning site that are designated as urban thoroughfare. The site is located within a city growth center. And then in the upper left-hand corner, you see that kind of bubbled shape area. That's the core transit area. That represents I believe it's a half-mile distance, that line, that dotted line, half-mile distance from future BRT station. So the site is currently served, again, with pretty good frequency of transit that goes along those urban thoroughfares, and then pretty close distance to that future BRT infrastructure and service. Next slide. Inconsistent with the future land use map because they want to build housing here, and they're maintaining that use in the zoning. It is consistent with the urban form map, consistent with a comprehensive plan overall. List of consistent policies here. Next slide. Inconsistent with the future land use map. There's your deadline, and then I think the next slide will show the change to the future land use map if approved. Yeah, so approval of the request will amend the future land use map from office research and development to office residential mixed use, which is consistent with some other sites in the area that were similarly disposed on the future land use map and approved for similar zoning. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, Jess Brandis with CASA is on the line as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Rains. I saw that. I'd like to now hear from Jess Brandis, representing the applicant.
Good morning, commissioners, and thank you, Matt, for that presentation. My name is Jess Brandis. I'm the Senior Director of Real Estate Development for CASA. Really just want to introduce CASA to you, let you know who we are, and then tell you why we're seeking this rezoning. Next slide, please. Our motto is the solution to homelessness is housing, and that is really what we focus on, creating housing for people with extremely low incomes, people with disabilities, and people with histories of homelessness. Next slide, please. We are a local nonprofit. We work here in the Triangle, the 3-county region, and have been doing so for 29 years. We own, operate, and manage almost 500 units in the 3-county areas, and we serve a variety of households in need. Next slide. And we're really looking for this rezoning. We're looking for this height increase and the TOD overlay for 3 reasons. We want to increase the height so that we have greater design flexibility. As Matt pointed out, the lower parcel is already fully developed. We own and operate apartments there. The undeveloped parcel, we're planning to develop a 100-unit apartment community called Kings Ridge that will serve persons who are experiencing homelessness and people at risk of homelessness. And we're looking for some height, additional height, so that we have greater flexibility in designing that building. We want that height so that we can have additional open space and other amenity areas instead of having to fill the site with a building footprint if possible. The second reason is so that then we're rezoning both parcels since they are contiguous. We want to have consistent zoning across the whole property that we own there. And lastly, we're seeking that TOD overlay because we want to decrease the amount of parking that we're required to build. Given the households that CASA typically serves, we are often required to build more parking than we need, and we'll have empty parking lots. That adds to increased stormwater retention needs and takes up space that we could otherwise be using for things like open space and playgrounds and things like that. And that is the end of my presentation, but I'm available for questions.
Okay, thank you. I see that we have one person signed up to speak in opposition of the matter. Can you please unmute Evelyn Sanders?
Morning.
Good morning.
My name is Evelyn Sanders, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Southeastern Healthcare of North Carolina. Southeastern North Carolina has been providing comprehensive health care in Southeast Raleigh for nearly 30 years. We'll be 30 years on August the 2nd. We are located at 3401 Carl Sandburg Court, directly adjacent to the proposed project by CASA. And let me first say that we are strong advocates for supporting housing, especially for historically marginalized population. However, we strongly oppose this project for the following reasons. There wasn't much mentioned, but we'll Carl Sandburg and Michael J. Smith Lane are very short streets. In fact, yesterday I drove it just to see how short it was, and it's nearly 0.2 miles from one end of Sunnybrook coming in one way, Sunnybrook going out the other way, Sunnybrook. The traffic is horrific in the mornings and the afternoon. And it's also within 1.8 mile of the location. Within 1.8 mile of this location, there is at least 5 affordable housing projects with residents of more than 198,788 people. And I got this from zoning report. We invite you to try to exit this area during peak time. And the proposed project, which will add additional unit, will even add even more persons to enter and exit with no traffic lights. Secondly, on this street, on Carl Sandburg Street and Michael J. Smith Lane, there's a real concern for the safety of the people that we serve, not just the disabled adults and frail elderly that we serve, but we also have disabled children, developmentally disabled children. We also have Holly Hill across the street with mentally ill. And in addition, at the end of Carl Sandburg Court is UNC Council Center. Now, the traffic issues and the increased residency can cause a safety problem. And then the third reason that we oppose it, what about the quality of life? Research has shown us that crowdedness impacts a person's development and their mental status, as well as their social skills. If we just continue to crowd this area with people, what impact does it have on the quality of life? Fourth reason, I have been listening to the reports of your agenda today, and I feel almost like I've been to a webinar, a seminar on affordable housing, and but everything has been affordable housing. I'm for that. I'm old school. I was the housing chair for the Wake County League of Women Voters forever. And I've been back there with CASA from day one. Very proud of CASA. But this is not an appropriate project. The zoning area where we are is commercial. Now, I don't know about you, but I never thought I would be saying not in my backyard based on my background. But this time I'm going to say this use is not appropriate. It would decrease the value of our property. And I'm concerned, as I said, about the history. I'm wondering whatever happened to the city of Raleigh's plans for scattered housing for low income and marginalized people. This plan is not consistent with the plans that I see and that my perception is. So I'm asking you to vote against this ill-planned project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Saunders. Okay, I would like to allow for questions and comments from commissioners. Does anyone have a question or comment? If so, please be recognized to speak. Okay, Commissioner O'Haver.
Thank you, Vice Chair Winters. It doesn't look like in our backup that a TIA was required. Can staff speak to that?
Good morning, and on transportation. You're correct. A TIA was not required. We looked at the existing entitlement and the proposed entitlement, and the difference in trips was fewer than 100 new trips during the peak hour. So we did not ask for a TIA at rezoning.
Thank you.
Okay, I see Commissioner, okay. I see Commissioner Bennett, and I saw Commissioner McIntosh.
You can let Commissioner McIntosh go first.
Okay, Commissioner McIntosh.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to echo, was it Ms. Saunders, the caller? I wanted to echo her concern about Raleigh continuing to follow its scattered site housing policy. And just to underline the cases we talked about today, the The Gresham Lake affordable housing was, of course, in Northeast Raleigh, and the other two cases were this one and then Rock Quarry Road at Sunnybrook, which is just down the street. So two in Southeast Raleigh, one in Northeast Raleigh. It, it feels like we're concentrating affordable housing in East Raleigh, and I believe Raleigh will be healthier if we have affordable housing everywhere. And I agree with the caller.
Thank you. Commissioner McIntosh? I'm sorry, Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you, Vice Chair Winters. I was going to echo what Commissioner McIntosh said, which was why I let her go first, because I thought we might be saying the same general thing. And I want to thank Ms. Saunders for her comments, because she said she felt like she'd been to a webinar. I felt like she gave us one, because I was looking at this and I was thinking, oh, this is great, this is great. And as she was talking, you know, I was like, oh, wow, I hadn't really thought about that. But she's right, and Commissioner McIntosh is right. We've mentioned this before about, I guess, the concentration of affordable housing and apartments in East Raleigh. And while I do celebrate that we've talked so much about affordable housing today, because this is a new experience for me, I'm excited that we're doing that. I do think it is more advantageous to the city to, you know, scatter it throughout the city and not just in one portion. Also, the traffic issues that she raised are a concern. I'm familiar with that area. I was just over there yesterday, actually, with my daughter getting her vaccine, and it is very congested. So I do echo her traffic concerns. And as she was talking, though, I was wondering, it seems like her mission with Southeast Health and CASA's mission are kind of similar. I mean, they both seem to want to help disadvantaged people. And so I was curious if they have talked, if they've been coordinating on this project at all, if there's maybe something that the applicant could do to gain the support of Ms. Saunders. I mean, because I guess they can already develop it at 3 stories, right? This is just a request to increase the height. So I was just curious if there's some sort of coordination that could happen, especially since they both seem to have similar missions of helping marginalized and disadvantaged persons.
Thank you. Is there another? Commissioner Rains, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I just had a question for staff chair, Vice Chair Winters. It was regarding the, if we went to this new residential mixed use future land use designation, what would the open space requirement be for this particular condition?
Thank you, Commissioner Rains. The open space requirement for development is the same under the existing and proposed zoning. So there wouldn't actually be a change to what is required there under the OX office mixed use zoning district. So that requirement would be unchanged. I think maybe what you're referring to or asking about is the applicant's representations of their intention for the rezoning request, and I believe that is to remove the requirement for parking, which is there's no parking required in the TOD district, and so the case that they're making is if we can stack our building 5 stories tall instead of 3, then we can have a taller building and eat up less of the land area. And if that land area does also not need to be consumed with parking, then there would just be more space left on the site undeveloped that they could then use or utilize for open space or other amenity for the residents. But the open space requirement is the same, and I believe it is, let me just check the code, or maybe someone can tell me in the chat. I think it's 10% of the site. Is that right? Yeah, I'll look that up and I'll let you know in just a minute. But I hope that's helpful. Does that get at any of your question?
Yes, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Commissioner Miller.
I thank Commissioner Bennett for her comments. My concerns also, I share the concerns generally about concentrating affordable housing in East Raleigh. In this case, looking at the proposed change to rezoning, as I think staff just mentioned, the proposed use, would that be permitted, except with respect to obviously the building height, but just in terms of use, would that proposed use be permitted under the current under the current zoning?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Miller. That's a great question. I have some few additional points that might be helpful. So currently, the property can be developed with a few hundred apartments. The request would improve or increase the number from, I'm looking for my table here. So right now, we estimate they could build about 323 apartments with a 3-story building. With a 5-story building, we think they could build 429 across those almost 10 acres. We know that that calculation tool we do to estimate may not always, if they tore it all down, that's the most they could build. I don't think that's their intention. Jess can probably tell you how many units they actually want to build there. I believe that what they're intending to build there can be built today. What they want to build is a taller building with less parking, and so they don't have to use all of the land, and they can be more efficient with their development. And then what that means is in the future, there's probably more land left over for another building. So yes, they can probably do what they want to do under the existing zoning. Their request is to allow them to use the land more efficiently, as Jess said. I also want to circle back. There's been conversation about the city's affordable housing location policy, and it's in the comprehensive plan in the housing section. And Southeast Raleigh, certain areas of Southeast Raleigh are in areas with minority populations that exceed 50%, households in poverty exceed 30%, and subsidized units exceed 8%. Those are areas where the city's affordable housing location policy discourages new affordable housing. There are geographic exceptions to those categories or those demographics, and the geographic exception is where there is frequent transit provided. So there's frequent transit provided to this site, and then there's even better transit coming with BRT. And so when affordable housing is located in areas where frequent transit is provided, it comes at that housing affordability from the other side of the ledger. Transportation costs are high. And so if someone can live in an apartment or a housing type that is either subsidized or is cheaper in comparison to other housing, and also live in a place where they don't need to own a car or multiple cars to run their errands or go to work or do whatever they need to do, the overall cost of living in that location is lowered because it also lowers the cost of transportation costs. And that's the justification for the geographic exception for housing in an area that has good transit service. And that's so the housing location policy, affordable housing location policy of the Housing and Neighborhoods Department does identify these areas with higher minority populations, higher households in poverty, and higher subsidized units. However, there is an exception because of the good transit. And so housing here would be consistent with that policy.
Yes, Commissioner Miller.
So to follow up on that point, it sounds like the existing use would be permitted under the or the proposed use would be permitted under the existing zoning, just with
Correct.
more parking available. And so with the new transit overlay district, this would actually eliminate that parking requirement. I know one of the concerns another concern was also about the increased traffic to the area. I guess if this was built, if the purpose of this is to create the transit overlay district, this would actually decrease parking versus the current zoning, presumably once it's built. So with the assumption that the residents would use the transit lines more frequently based on the new use. So it sounds like this might actually perhaps mitigate or at least stay consistent with the current amount of traffic in that area. So based on those reasons, or for those two concerns, that makes me more inclined to approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw Commissioner Lampman's hand.
Thanks. I also just wanted to make the point that affordable housing is very difficult to underwrite and to finance. And with a lot of, even though we're able to approve a lot of these projects, not all of them will be built. You know, in reference to the one earlier, the senior center, that one with the having to fund the extension of the road is very costly. And so that will put additional constraints on that site. Furthermore, it's a competitive process. That site may or may not be awarded tax credits. So although we are approving some of these sites, they may not be built just based on the constraints that are more cumbersome to affordable housing development. So I would just take that into consideration as well. So I'm in support of this project.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, with that being said, I would entertain a motion. Commissioner Miller.
I move to approve case Z821. This case is overall consistent with the comprehensive plan and it's reasonable and in the public interest. In particular, it's consistent with policies LU 1.3, conditional use district consistency, LU 2.2, compact development, LU 4.6, transit oriented development, and LU 6.3, mixed use and multimodal transportation.
Okay, is there a second? Commissioner Rains?
Second.
I'm sorry, I see I'm sorry. I saw a hand, I'm sorry. I can't see your name and it escapes me. Our attorney, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, no problem. No problem. It's
York,
David
yes.
York. Yeah, sorry. If Commissioner Miller would amend her
Your land
motion
use map.
to reflect the change to office and residential. It's usually on that second page in that table where you get your motion language, but it's not this time. It would be a change to office and residential mixed use.
Thank you. And to also amend the future land use map to be consistent with this rezoning request.
Okay, Commissioner Rains, do you still want to second?
Yes, second. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Commissioner Miller has offered the motion and Commissioner Rains has offered the second. I'll ask Shanitha for a roll call of members to record their individual votes.
Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman?
Aye.
Commissioner Mann?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver?
Aye.
Commissioner Rains?
Aye.
Vice Chair Winters.
Aye. Okay, so the motion passes 8-0 unanimously, and we will return to the conclusion of our agenda.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Winters. That concludes all of the discussion items on our agenda, and next is the approval of the minutes. I would like to entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes. Commissioner Miller?
I move to approve the minutes listed in the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second? Commissioner McIntosh?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Miller and a second by Commissioner McIntosh. I will ask for a show of hands to record individual votes, and I will announce the outcome of the vote at the end. Those in favor of approving the minutes? Those opposed? Okay, and motion passes unanimously. And now on to the report of the chairperson. As you saw, our retreat is scheduled on May 7th from 9 until 12. If you have any additional suggestions for topics, please send that to staff. And also, I would like to say we moved really efficiently this morning. Everyone was very well prepared. Commissioner McIntosh, I believe I'm going to have to send you a cookie or an additional something. That was very well done today. Thank you very much for the heavy lifts. Moving on to report of the members, I will ask also that each committee member let us know when the next meeting of their committee is. Starting with Vice Chair Winters.
Thank you. That will be strategic planning. We have the third Tuesday of the month starting at 10 a.m. Forgive me, I don't know the exact date right now, but that is the allocated time. And I would just like to make a brief comment regarding Z7020. I wanted to share my reaction during that case because I did make the comment that I was in tears. So as we are by now, as we're all aware, a lot has happened in these last 3 weeks. In that week alone, we saw a young man assaulted. I think it was in North Carolina from walking home, being told he doesn't belong there. We had a young man in Raleigh practicing ROTC drills in his cul-de-sac when the police were called. And fortunately, it ended well, but it could have ended differently. Not to mention the horrors of shootings and assaults and trials of unarmed people, regarding unarmed people of color. In that moment, what I saw when we were going through the process of voting and hearing the case, I saw my grandmother's house, which was 2 streets directly across from the location of Z7020, where she was born and raised with her parents. And across the street from that, directly across the street, is a Leitner home, funeral home, where to date the only Black mayor lived and raised his family. And literally down the street is Shaw University, the first historically Black college university built in the South after emancipation. This land, South Park, is one of the last remains of the freedmen's villages left in Raleigh. And these lands were set aside specifically for people who had endured the horrors of chattel enslavement, so they could finally have peace and experience liberty that had eluded them for so long. With every rezoning and change that we're seeing in this location specifically, again, one of the last that remain, people and families who have lived there before it became a cool place to be may soon be told, you don't belong here. And that was painful. And to be clear, it doesn't matter who the developer is or where they went to school if gentrification and displacement occurs. So that's what you saw in that moment when I became emotional. I'm not looking for permission. I'm not looking for sympathy or forgiveness. I'm merely giving context to the moment and saying preserving historically Black neighborhoods are vital and should be to America, to the state, and to our city, but they don't seem to be adequately preserved. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Vice Chair Winters. Do any other commissioners have comments? Commissioner Mann?
Thanks, Chair Fox. Yes, we had a text exchange committee meeting that was canceled last week because we just couldn't get quorum. So I'll be sending out notifications, and I guess this week, in the next few days, to kind of check the temperature on committee members to see if we can reschedule that meeting, or I'll check with Mr. Justin Rometta to see if we can just take those two items. We only had two items to discuss, and see if we can add those two items to another discussion at our later meeting for next month. So I just want to give you guys that notification that we canceled our meeting last week, and to see if we need to reschedule that meeting, or to see if we can just add those two agenda items onto another discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Mann. Commissioner Bennett?
Thank you, Chair Fox. The next Transportation Committee meeting will be the third Thursday. I'm not sure of that date, I'm sorry. It's immediately before Committee of the Whole at 3 p.m.
Excellent, thank you. Commissioner McIntosh?
Thank you, Chair Fox. I'm not sure if this is possible. I'm wondering if it would be possible to make a small change to the motion I made for Z2220 East End Market PD. I was in a rush. I hadn't prepared ahead of time, and I listed, one of the things I listed was does not provide sufficient open space. What I meant to list was does not include appropriate transition requirements. I don't know if there's a way to change the statement or not.
I believe we would have to take a motion and a vote to reconsider that item. Do we have a motion to reconsider the East End PD?
Do I need, sorry to jump in, Chair Fox, do I need to recuse myself from this conversation?
Yes, sir, I believe you do. And Mr. York has a comment.
I was going to say, Chair, if you'd like, you could do as you did when you took that matter up and say without objection, his recusal remains in effect.
Okay, without any objection, Commissioner O'Haver's recusal remains in effect. So I'd like to entertain a motion to reconsider Z2220, the East End Market PD. Commissioner McIntosh would like to make a motion.
Am I just making a new motion that's restated?
You're making a motion that we reconsider the item, and then we'll vote on the reconsideration.
Okay, I move to reconsider Z2220 East End Market PD.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Commissioner Bennett? Thank you. By show
Second.
of, thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't get unmuted.
I can read your body language at this point. So we have a motion to reconsider the item made by Commissioner McIntosh and a second by Commissioner Bennett. I believe we can do a show of hands, Mr. York, to vote on reconsidering this item, or would you like a roll call?
No, you can do show of hands. We'll need roll call on the subsequent motion.
Thank you, sir. By show of hands, which commissioners are supportive of reconsidering the East End Market PD item? Okay, any opposed? Okay, seeing no opposition, the motion passes unanimously. So Commissioner McIntosh, you have the floor if you would like to make your follow-up motion.
Thank you, Chair Fox. I move to recommend denial of rezoning case C2220 East End Market PD. The rezoning request is not reasonable and in the public interest. As currently designed, it is inconsiderate of existing residents and businesses. It is not compatible with the surrounding area and does not include appropriate transition requirements.
Thank you. And Mr. York, do you have a comment?
Yeah, if we're going to redo this, let's make sure we get it all right in here. You would, if you could mention consistency with the comprehensive plan overall, and then staff's recommendation is that it's inconsistent with the future land use map, which would result in an amendment to the future land use map from moderate density residential and neighborhood mixed use to community mixed use. That's found on page 7 of the staff write-up.
Sorry, I can't raise my hand, but I believe if Ms. McIntosh's motion is to denial, then there would be no need to change the future land use map.
That's true. That's true.
Okay,
So just a statement that it's consistent with the plan and consistent with the map, and then everything you just said.
Correct. I'm sorry.
And I apologize because this is getting into a conversation we've been having where I believe the staff's assessment was consistent with the comprehensive plan, but I disagree. Are we allowed to disagree with staff's assessment?
Yes, by all means. That's just staff's recommendation. You do not have to follow staff's recommendation. And so if you want to say it's inconsistent overall with the comprehensive plan, that is the Planning Commission's purview.
Okay, so should I just restate this again?
yes, please.
Okay. I move to recommend denial of rezoning case Z2220 East End Market PD. The rezoning request is not reasonable and in the public interest. It is not consistent with the comprehensive plan. As currently designed, it is inconsiderate of existing residents and businesses. It is not compatible with the surrounding area and does not include appropriate transition requirements.
Thank you. And do we have a second on that motion? Commissioner Winters?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner McIntosh and a second by Vice Chair Winters. I would like to ask for a roll call of the vote.
Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair Fox,
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman,
Aye.
Commissioner Mann,
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Nay.
Commissioner O'Haver.
Recused.
All righty. Commissioner Raines.
Nay.
The motion passes 5-2.
I didn't.
Vice Chair Winters.
Oops. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Vice Chair Winters.
Aye.
The motion passes 6-2. Okay. Do any other commissioners have a report to add before I move on to the report of the Deputy Planning Director? Commissioner O'Haver?
Just quickly, thank you, Chair Fox. Just quickly, I think this issue will probably continue to come up. I don't know that it's warranted for a retreat, but just wanted to point out that recommending approval on Z6210 Rock Quarry Road, we were in a similar condition where we were removing conditions that were previously approved. And that conversation had come up on an earlier case. So I have a feeling with, to my point, looking into the future, I think rezonings are going to be, we might want to just talk about this briefly at the retreat just to make sure we have a good handle on it. So.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. I understand Mr. Crane might be able to provide us with some of the dates that were referred to for the committee meetings.
Sure thing, I'd be happy to. So first up is the Strategic Planning Committee. That meeting would happen on Tuesday, May 18th at 10 a.m. The Tech Change Committee, the regular meeting would be the same day, Tuesday, May 18th at 4 p.m. And then the Transportation Committee would meet on Thursday, May 27th at 3 p.m. immediately before the Committee of the Whole. So those are the three subcommittee meeting dates. I did hear from Chairperson of Tech Change and Transportation affirmatively there would be a meeting I believe that we heard the same thing from Strategic Planning Committee. We would just need to know what topic you would like to discuss. I'm not sure what's pending in your committee today.
Would you like us to email that information to staff, or would you like to discuss it at the current meeting?
Email is perfect. And what I can do is I can reach out to each respective chairperson just to confirm the meeting date and the topics to be discussed. I'll do that this week.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Crane. Now I would like to move on to the report of the Deputy Planning Director, Mr. Bowers.
Thanks. Some updates from City Council from the items that were reported out at the last council meeting. One was scheduled for May 4th public hearing, which is E4720. That's a very crowded public hearing date. So 3 other items were sent to a mid-month public hearing on May 18th. They were TC 1919, the administrative alternate changes, the rezoning of NCSU Centennial Campus, and Z7020, the Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, all 3 of which had received Planning Commission recommendation for approval. The final item that you reported out was scheduled for June 1st. That was the controversial case on Glenwood Avenue at Rimbert Drive, Z5720. 4 items were approved at the meeting, which included Z4820 South Glover Street. There was a additional commitment, although not part of the case, to relocate the existing houses there. Z5020 on Pleasant Grove Road, Z5920 on Capitol Boulevard, and Z6320 also on Capitol Boulevard, all 3 of which had received unanimous recommendations to approval, were also approved by City Council. Z4320 Trailwood Drive was deferred for additional conditions, and the council will take that up again on May 4th in the afternoon meeting. And then 1 item was deferred to the May 18th May 18th hearing, which was Z4920 Tryon Road. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Bauer. With that, if there are no more comments from commissioners for the good of the order, that concludes this meeting of the Planning Commission. Our next meeting is scheduled for May 11 at 9 a.m. Thank you all.